story about the foxes and the coyotes. This is what my grandpa heard every single time he picked me up from school. And without delay, he would jump into some elaborate story about how the foxes always ended up outsmarting the coyotes and coming out on top. These stories were accompanied by some extremely unhealthy snacks and bug juice. It was a tradition that we had, and it was one of my favorites. I don't know how he didn't get tired of telling me all these stories based on the same topic. I only have one answer. He was a saint. He loved me, and he had the most patience out of anyone I've ever met, except for when it came to bad drivers. He was overall a great guy and had the best sense of humor, and he could out-stubborn just about anyone. Today, I've dedicated this speech to the person who means the most to me, my grandpa. My papa's name was John Seymour Mayo, and I always thought it was hilarious that he was named after a condiment. He was born on August 5th in 1938, and he grew up in Louisville with his three older sisters, who were all very tall, and clearly I did not get those genes. Anyways, he spent most of his time on his farm, and he always had the best stories from when he was growing up, and one of my favorites was about a chicken. So like I said earlier, he grew up in 1938, and I don't know if y'all are familiar with history, but indoor plumbing wasn't really big in farms in Kentucky, at least in his case. So his grandparents' farm had an outhouse, and he had to like walk out of the house to go to the bathroom, which must be rough. So one night he had to go to the bathroom, and given that it was rural Kentucky, it was kind of dark and hard to see. So when he finally made it, he went to sit down when, and I quote, something bit him on the tush. Naturally, he thought it was a snake, but it ended up being just a chicken. And he proceeded to tell me that he chased this chicken around for what was probably an exaggerated amount of time, but eventually the chicken won. And I don't know why, but this was always one of my favorite stories, but he did tell a lot better than I just did. And when I was growing up, my grandpa was always around, which is actually quite impressive because for the first 5 years of my life, I lived in Mississippi, Virginia Beach, and Florida, and he lived in Kentucky. And so he would always drive down to Florida and go to Disney World with me and my family. And along the way, there were a couple injuries when he was supposed to be watching me, but instead he fell asleep. One time, I fell in the fireplace when he was napping instead of supervising. So my mom rushed me to the ER, and the doctors thought that she had burned me because he didn't want to fess up and tell them that he wasn't watching me. But eventually he did because he felt bad for her because they kept harassing her. And I think this story is hilarious, not because I got hurt, like that's not funny. You may think that's funny, I don't think it's funny. But because he was always sleeping, like if he was sitting down, that's exactly what he looked like every single time. He was knocked out. And even though I was either getting hurt due to his napping or hurting him, which is a story for a different time, he was my best friend growing up. He's left such an impact on my life, and I wear multiple things that remind me of him every day. I wear this necklace every day, and I feel anxious when I'm not wearing it, because I'm like, oh my gosh, did I lose it? Like, it's bad. And he gave it to my mom a couple years ago, and not too long ago, she gave it to me. And it's my favorite piece of jewelry, and I wear it just about everywhere. Now, don't tell anyone this, we gotta kind of keep it on the DL, but I have a tattoo that's also dedicated to him. And it is hands down the best $50 I've ever spent. And being able to have a reminder of him on my body all the time brings me so much peace, knowing that he's just there. And he's had such a positive impact on my life that I want everyone to know that. So when people ask me about my tattoo, I get to share a little bit about his life with them, and that just makes my day. And for my whole life, I've striven to make him proud, and even after he's gone, I'm still striving to make him proud. He's been my inspiration for basically my entire life, and he worked hard all his life and traveled to many places, just like I want to do. His favorite place to travel was Alaska. He always went there, and he had all these stories. He had, in his office, he had all these pictures of Alaska and like these grizzly bears as they were catching salmon that were swimming up the waterfall. I still don't understand how they swim up the waterfall, but that's a different story. And he told me all these stories about the bears catching the salmon and how you should never, ever run downhill if a bear's chasing you. And so one day I went to go to Alaska and watch the northern lights and watch the sunrises and see the grizzly bears catch the salmon, but maybe not get chased by one. And even though he isn't on this earth anymore, I can still feel him with me, and that's more than enough for me. Jack Thorne once said, those we love never truly leave us. There are things that cannot touch death. I find this to be one of the truest statements that I've ever heard. When my grandpa left the physical world, he never left my heart, which is really all that matters. As I wrap up my speech, I want to remind you all of one thing: love deeply. Love God deeply, love each other deeply, love yourself deeply. Life might be hard sometimes, but never forget to love deeply. Thank you.